you specialize in the field of AI and cybersecurity. So my question to you will be, AI is not limited to only tech fields now. Abhi healthcare, maybe fashion, maybe agriculture, maybe even in fact there's AI. So how do you see the evolution?
There is the technical core of AI, and then there are applications of AI. Think of it like mathematics or something. There is the core of mathematics, but once you understand certain elements of that mathematical core, you can use that mathematics to solve a problem in finance, to solve a problem in health. So it's the same kind of thing here. AI is an enabling technology, and as the name itself suggests, it's artificial intelligence. So the idea it is trying to do the kind of things that we humans ascribe to the word intelligence.
With its leading institutions, cutting-edge technology, and access to some of the biggest tech hubs like Silicon Valley, the USA has always offered a parallel opportunity for growth and innovation. And today we have a very special guest from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Dr. Anupam Joshi. Dr. Anupam is the acting dean of the College of Engineering and Information Technology, the director at the UMBC Cybersecurity, as well as the professor of the Computer Science and Electrical Engineering. Welcome to the show, Dr. Joshi, and we are so honored to have you here, and I'm so looking forward to our conversation.
It's my pleasure,
excited.
Entirely my pleasure. Thank you.
So for our audience, would you mind introducing yourself a little about your experience and years in the education?
Certainly. So I'm a Delhi ka ladka, grew up in Delhi, went to school in the old timers will remember these names, Modern School and Barakhamba Road, and then went to IIT Delhi for my undergraduate education. And after that, I went to the US to pursue graduate studies. I got my PhD in computer science from Purdue University, let's say a long time ago, and not say when. And after that, I became a faculty member, and about 27 years ago, I came and joined my current institution, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I started as an assistant professor, rose through the ranks. You've now mentioned my current title. So I guess that's a very quick summary of how I got to where I am.
Right. So you have you have been to very prestigious institutions, and now you are working as a professor in the UMBC. So, and you specialize in the field of AI and cybersecurity. So my question to you will be, AI is not limited to only tech fields now. Abhi healthcare, maybe fashion, maybe agriculture, maybe even in fact there's AI. So how do you see the evolution?
The way I would think about it, Shweta, and that's a very perceptive question that you are beginning with. There is the technical core of AI, and then there are applications of AI, right? So think of it like mathematics or something. There is the core of mathematics, but once you understand certain elements of that mathematical core, you can use that mathematics to solve a problem in finance, to solve a problem in health. So it's the same kind of thing here. AI is an enabling technology, and as the name itself suggests, it's artificial intelligence. So the idea it is trying to do the kind of things that we humans ascribe to the word intelligence. And so clearly, since intelligence is required to do almost everything in life,
right,
AI can help in almost everything in all the fields. So yeah, I think that is we often get blinded to the fact that there is a core technology here, but recognizing that not only is there a core technology, but then there are applications. And so all of that are broadly being talked about as a single thing called AI right now. But if you're an aspiring student, you probably want to think about some of these differences and where you are more interested.
Right. So AI के बारे में सारी बात कर रहे हैं, and I'm going to ask you a very common question जो सबके दिमाग में होता है. Traditional jobs AI खत्म कर देगा, ऐसा सब सोचते हैं, काफ़ी ख़त्म भी हो चुके हैं, and there's a lot more going on. So what's the future? I just want to know your opinion on that.
अब देखिए, वैसे तो मेरा नाम जोशी है, पर फ्यूचर के बारे में डिस्कस करना थोड़ा हमेशा डेंजरस होता है. पर आपने जो सवाल पूछा उसका मैं जवाब यूँ देने का प्रयत्न करूँगा कि बहुत पहले एक जॉब होती थी, उसको उर्दू में कातिब कहते थे. दीज वर पीपल हुज जॉब वाज टू राइट.
राइट.
अब किसी ज़माने में प्रिंटिंग प्रेस बन गई कातिब की जॉब खत्म हो गई. आप ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई द टेक्नोलॉजी इज व्हाट इज द फ्यूचर. फ्यूचर इज कि देयर वर अदर थिंग्स दैट वर enabled. Talking more recently, right? So again, I'm dating myself, but around the time I was in high school and college, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi had begun to introduce some reforms, and computers were being introduced into banks. And I remember that bank workers went on strike कि जी कंप्यूटर आ जाएंगे तो बैंक की नौकरी खत्म हो जाएगी. I think you can count the number of people that are employed by banks today and count the number of people that were employed then, and you will find that in fact they have grown. Right. So I would think something similar, right? That AI is an enabling technology that will let us do certain things better. That does mean that certain things that you were doing yourself today, right? So even before we get into the sort of the current craze around generative AI, let me give you a simple example of where automation of various flavors changes the job market. So for a long time, if you were a freshly graduated law student, you got hired as a junior in some senior lawyer's chambers, and your job would be, the lawyer would come and say, फला फला केस है, इसके जरा references ढूंढ के लाओ कि who else has referred to this or that. And you would actually go to a stack of books, pull out the AIR, flip open and read it and say, oh, ये मुकदमा relevant है. Today, you go to LexisNexis, or actually these days not even LexisNexis, Google, you type and here are all the related references, right? That has changed what entry-level lawyers do. It hasn't removed the job of entry-level lawyers. So I think if you think about the future, something similar will begin to happen, or is beginning to happen with AI, right? So for these kinds of podcasts, there would traditionally be copywriters. Copywriters would write the copy.
Right.
What questions to be asked, how the answers will be framed. Today, and I did this as an example, I was interviewed by the local television station in Baltimore, and they were asking the same question: how will the future be impacted? So I knew that question was coming. So before that thing, I went to, this is now 3 years ago, so early versions of ChatGPT, and I said, write me a story about crime in whatever city and include a quote from the mayor of that city. I showed the output to the reporter. She said, hamare copywriters will be in trouble, right? That doesn't mean that the copywriter's job has disappeared. The copywriter can now operate at a higher level because what they were doing manually is now automated, and they can add value to that by contextualizing it and so on. So I guess that's a very long-winded answer to say AI will change the nature of jobs. It will eliminate some, but it will create some new ones.
Right. So the basic thing is that you will have to upgrade yourself.
Yes.
If you'll upgrade yourself, you have plenty of jobs. If you don't upgrade yourself, you don't have jobs.
If you say that I only know how to do a balance sheet on pen and paper, I can't use Excel, then yes, when the computers come in banks, core banking software, whatever is used.
Right. So since you have graduated from IIT Bombay, one of the one of the most prestigious institutions, in India. So how do you compare the rigorous, curriculum of IIT versus the, curriculum of US?
So Shweta, let me push back a little on that question in the following sense. देखो, अगर आप कहो कि जी आप IIT दिल्ली और IIT बॉम्बे के करिकुलम को कैसे कंपेयर करते हो, मैं दोनों को देख के कोई आपको जवाब दे सकता हूँ. आप मुझसे कहो कि आप IIT दिल्ली और US के करिकुलम को, US में तो हजारों यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं.
If we take the top 100,
if you take the top 100, now that's a good question, right? So I would say, and let me talk very particularly about my subfield, computer science, because that's the thing I'm most familiar with. The answer is generally true of almost everything. So in computer science, if you're teaching in a good university in the US, you will follow the guidelines from the IEEE ACM Joint Committee on the curriculum in computer science. Your curriculum will end up looking not very different from what IIT is teaching. Right. Now, there is a lot of variabilities in prestigious universities like IITs or the top universities in the US, simply because they provide a lot of flexibility to me as a faculty member. At the end of my course, when I'm teaching operating systems, students should know these things. How I get them there, entirely up to me. Right. So even within IITs, you just take the same course from two different professors, and you will learn the same set of high level objectives, but how you will learn, whether you will do more projects or less assignments, or more assignments or less projects, whether this topic will be emphasized or that topic, so unlike some of the more traditional universities in India, IITs sort of have been built on the sort of a more American kind of model, right? So there's a lot of flexibility that individuals have. So what I would say is that these are similar, not the same. They're also not the same because IITs are sort of built on this model of, you take this big exam, you do the JEE main, then you do the JEE advanced, and only a select number of you are even allowed to study in the IIT. And of that, the branch choice is further limited. Whereas in the US, especially for large public universities like those of us in the University of Maryland system, there's no such thing. I mean, we are there to serve the citizens of the state of Maryland. So anyone can say they want to study computer science, right? It's my job, as long as they possess the basic background, to make sure that they are successful. So that also changes how I approach the class, right? How I will teach a class. So I would say the fundamentals are very similar. The dissimilarities occur both because who is sitting in the audience may be different, and because in both these systems, a lot of flexibility is provided to the teacher on how they want to approach a particular topic, as long as they meet, every course has certain outcomes, you just have to meet them.
Right. But it does give an edge. I mean, just like you mentioned, कि IIT का होता है एक whole set of, difficult सा exam you have to pass, and then a certain number of students are only allowed to study in IIT. But the name itself, makes a lot of difference. Like studying in IIT versus studying in a regular. So a lot of students are like scared कि अगर IIT में नहीं हुआ तो भाई फिर तो इतना अच्छा career नहीं बनेगा. So is that true?
Not really. And इस समय देखें जो US की टॉप टेक मल्टीनेशनल्स हैं, कईयों के CEOs इंडियंस हैं. आप काउंट कर लीजिए उसमें से कितने कई IIT से निकले हैं, मतलब एंड वी कैन बी जस्टिफाइबली प्राउड ऑफ दैट. बट कई लोग IIT से नहीं निकले. सत्या नडेला जो माइक्रोसॉफ्ट चला रहे हैं, वो तो IIT से नहीं निकले ना.
नहीं. आप
ये तो नहीं कह सकते ना कि ओ जी ये तो IIT में नहीं निकले थे, इनका तो जीवन बर्बाद हो गया, राइट? सो अ लॉट ऑफ इट इज, so you get certain prestige value. Let's be honest. Sure. If you walk out and say, oh, I studied in MIT or IIT, you get certain prestige points. That maybe opens the first set of doors for you. उसके बाद तो आपकी काबिलियत है.
उसके बाद, right. Okay, sir, so let's talk about the UMBC now. So how is the college preparing students for the AI-driven future? What are the courses, and how is it integrated with the AI and tech?
AI, if you ask those of us in the technology field, right, this is probably the fourth time that AI has been on the Gartner hype cycle. The first time was in the 1950s and 1960s.
1950s? Yeah. There was an AI in 1950s?
Yes. You can read the original papers, right? There was a famous conference organized by the US Department of Defense with, faculties that were defining. And if you want to go back even further, you can look at the examples of what it means for something to be computable. What does it mean for people to think? These are philosophical arguments that have been happening for a few centuries. Right. Let me give you a simple example. आपने अगर फिजिक्स का कोर्स पढ़ा है तो आपको वेवलेंथ सिखाई होगी कि जी येलो कलर की ये वेवलेंथ होती है. पर अगर उसी वेवलेंथ को आप भी देखती हैं और मैं भी देखता हूँ, तो अपने अपने अनुभव के आधार पे हम, कोई कहेगा जी ये तो थोड़ा सा नारंगी सा लगा है, कोई कहेगा ये तो येलो विद अ सैफरन टिंज है, ये तो कोई कुछ, राइट? सो physical artifact of sensing and our thought processes, are they the same thing? Are they different things? What does it mean to be intelligent? These have been topics in philosophy for a long time. And once computers came about, those topics naturally transitioned from philosophy into computer science. Okay, what does it mean for a computer to do anything, right? To compute. So some of these go back to the 1920s, but the term AI itself was, I think, came into origin in the 1950s. There was a famous conference that was held. So as I said, this is the fourth cycle at least of AI hype. So how are we preparing? One, AI was always a part of, say, our computer science or our information systems or our computer engineering curriculum. Those courses have existed for 30, 40, 50 years. What technology is covered in that course changes based on advances. Obviously, we're not teaching the same thing we taught 30 years ago. We're not talking. I mean, we start with, and again, some of your listeners who are more interested in the field will understand these references. अब मैं परसेप्ट्रॉन्स आपको 2 मिनट में बताता हूँ कि एक परसेप्ट्रॉन नाम की चीज़ होती थी और मैं आगे चले जाता हूँ. आज से 30 साल पहले मैं आपको 10 लेक्चर परसेप्ट्रॉन के बारे में दे रहा होता था. तो there are those changes. If I remember correctly from UMBC, the first PhD thesis, computer science department got created in UMBC in 1984 or 85. In 1986 was the first PhD thesis on the AI topic. Okay. Interestingly, by an Indian student, but we'll ignore that for a minute, right? So we have always been preparing our students for AI. What has changed, and I go back to your first question, that AI is moving out from just being a technology subject,
right,
to touching a lot of things at scale. It was already touching. So in the last revolution of AI, which sort of waned in the early 90s, the washing machines that the Japanese were selling, they were, and I'm using the Japanese pronunciation here because that's how they're advertising, the neurophazy system. Neurophazy is a subset of AI, because what they were doing is they had sensors in the washing machine to sense how much dust there is in the water once you put the clothes in, and based on that they would adapt the cycle.
That's cool. Something cool, yeah.
Right? Now, of course, it's still being done. Now it is touching everything, as you said, health,
right,
even sort of, agriculture, every law, right? See, every facet of life is being touched by AI. So the way we are changing is, so about a decade ago, we created within the computer science and within our information systems tracks in AI. Now we are moving towards creating full-fledged degrees in AI, right? So instead of just saying, okay, AI is something that is a subfield of computer science and I'm just going to give you specialization there, I'm saying AI is now growing big enough that your core will still be computer science, but I'm going to focus much more on the AI elements, right? So there is that. We work closely with our government and industry partners to help refine, these curriculum changes and things of that nature. So, so I think we can, those are some of the ways, right, that we are both changing our curricular approaches, changing what we're doing in research, and working with our industry and government partners to make sure that whatever we are covering for our students is responsive to the needs outside.
Absolutely. So, according to your answer, US में तो बहुत सारी universities, a lot of universities teaching AI, cybersecurity, and tech and everything. So how is the UMBC different, and why should a student choose UMBC?
So that's also an interesting question, and answering that is hard, if I'm being honest, right? Because this is like saying, how do you choose between IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay?
Right.
They're both probably going to do a great job of teaching you, right?
Absolutely.
They're both probably going to do a great job of covering the similar kind of material. So if you're going to, so UMBC is an R1, right? So if you're going to one of the R1 caliber universities, and for those of your audience that are not familiar, R1 is the highest tier of research university in the United States. You'll probably get a similar experience, right? So now I will change focus and say this, right? Depending on what level you are, let's say you're going for a PhD, then you probably want to look at who are the faculty, what kind of specific research in, say, AI or cybersecurity or whatever it is that they're doing, and which one interests you the most. And then that's sort of one of your decisions, because at the core level, it'll all be similar, right? If you're not going for a PhD, but if you're going for a master's or a bachelor's degree, then, so for example, we happen to be, I think, lucky to be placed in the Baltimore, Washington region, very rich in opportunities, right next to the center of government, right? Lots of government agencies that do cutting edge work, in some cases, secret cutting edge work that is, we get to participate in, and so on and so forth. And a rich sort of cultural life, as I was discussing in some of the previous discussions. So from our campus, the airport is a 5 minutes drive.
That's a plus point. Huge plus point.
If like me, you have to fly out to India now and so, being 5 minutes away from an airport is valuable.
Absolutely.
Right? You want to buy Indian groceries, there are 5 or 6 choices within a few miles of our campus. Right? But then if you are in that kind of big city environment, it has its downsides. It is a big city environment. There are a lot of people, right? There are traffic jams. So some people might prefer to say, oh, I'm going to go and study in this area that's, remote, in the middle of the country, So what I'm saying is that things outside of academics will begin to influence your decision. What I would like to say, without saying anything bad about anyone else, is that we have a very strong curricular program. We have fantastic collaborations with industry. Our students, some of them choose to stay in the East Coast, Maryland area, but in these fields, a large number of our students end up in either Seattle or the Bay Area. In fact, last week I was in the Bay Area meeting some of our alums who are, pretty high up in the food chains in some of these tech companies. So, including, and again, I'm dating myself, I now have former students who are running large PLL centers for, okay, I shouldn't name companies. So I think we have a good system of both education, being in a great sort of environment, and having good connections to the industry to sort of create the jobs pipeline for our students.
Right. So you have also published around 400 papers, research papers, if I'm not wrong. So what trends do you see? Say, if a student thinks about computer science, सबसे पहला दिमाग में आता है data analytics या data scientist. So how do you see the trends going on in the job market for students? I know the answer is going to be pretty much same, but still.
So no, this is an important thing. The question is कि ये podcast शायद आधे घंटे का है और उसमें 2-3 घंटे का भाषण दिया जा सकता है कि trends in the future का. So it's a very perceptive question. I'll try to make my answer brief. And I think the seeds of the answer are what you said in the beginning, right? So AI is touching a lot of things. And as I said, part of my response was that there is the core technology of AI and then there is the applications of AI. So part of the future is in a field like computer science or in a field like AI, there is a path that says, I will study computer science or AI, whatever, right? I'll get trained in the specifics of those disciplines, and then I will be hired by a Google or an IBM or a Microsoft to write the next generation of machine learning software, to write the next generation of file system, to write the next generation of voice recognition, to write the next generation of Gemini or whatever, right? That path is what students traditionally think of. Increasingly, though, a large number of jobs will happen at the intersection of these fields. I understand how machine learning algorithms work or how deep learning algorithms work, and I have a sufficient knowledge of, say, microbiology to actually get a job working for a Moderna, right? Or a Gilead Sciences or a whatever, to develop the next generation of drug therapy, right? Some of your listeners may know, but the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, it caused much problems with our friends in chemistry. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry this year was given to computer scientists because they used AI to solve a very important problem in microbiology, which is protein folding, right? So proteins are linear chains, but in situ, in your body, they actually fold, and then depending on how they fold, they affect how the body functions. And so for a long time, this was a huge challenge that was required wet labs to figure out how proteins were folding. And now suddenly here's a computer, no lab, nothing, it's giving you the answer. So they got the Nobel Prize, right? But you can't do that kind of work if you say, well, I only understand computer science, I have done 10 courses in AI, but I don't know what a DNA looks like. वो मैंने 10वीं में पढ़ा था, उसके बाद मैं भूल गया. So there will be more and more jobs at this kind of intersection. AI for finance. We're doing this podcast. Your colleagues will edit and create. I don't know if you have seen Notebook LM that Google put out. And I encourage your listeners to try that out. Notebook LM में जाके मैं अपने पिछले 15-20 पेपर्स PDF अपलोड कर देता हूँ. उसके बाद नोटबुक LM एक पॉडकास्ट क्रिएट करता है जिसमें दो लोग आपस में बात कर रहे हैं, जिसमें क्वेश्चंस उस टॉपिक के बारे में और आंसर्स आते हैं कि हाँ जी हमने इस पेपर में एंड इट्स अनलेस आपको कोई बता दे कि ये एआई ने जनरेट किया, यू विल नॉट नो. यू विल थिंक कि कोई सचमुच प्रोफेसर अनुपम जोशी से बात कर रहा है उनके पेपर्स के बारे में और वो जवाब दे रहे हैं, राइट? सो नाउ टू डू दैट, टू टेक दिस three camera setup shooting that we are doing and create it into a podcast or an Insta reel requires a certain skill set from our colleagues on the editing side. Now, if you're going to go into that job market and you understand how AI can help, right? But then you also you have to understand three camera setup क्या होता है, साउंड लेवल्स क्या होते हैं, वाइट बैलेंस कैसे किया जाता है, राइट? लाइटिंग कैसे अफेक्ट की जाती है. अगर आपको वो सब नहीं पता और सिर्फ एआई पता है तो आप इस जॉब से अलग हो गए. तो दैट्स द फ्यूचर, दैट अ लॉट ऑफ दिस, देयर विल स्टिल बी जॉब्स, a large number of jobs for just I am a hardcore AI person that Google will hire to do the next thing, right? But there will be a lot more jobs which is Google will hire me to do the automatic podcast generation because I understand how podcasts are, what editing is, what light effects are, what sound effects are.
Absolutely. So AI is actually integrated in a lot more things now.
AI is increasingly becoming an enabler. It's becoming your co-worker if you think about it, right? तो आप जो कह रही थी कि jobs चली जाएंगी से ज़्यादा वो है कि आपके साथ एक relatively well trained instead of a person system बैठा होगा which understands that domain and can actually help you do your job better.
That's absolutely. Even we also use AI a lot. Knowingly, unknowingly, we are using AI. So now coming to my next question about the international education. So going into a different country is like a whole lot of new experiences. It's very scary for students and for parents. So let's talk about the safety. How does the UMBC ensure the safety of the students, and if they are feeling the homesickness, are there any services or aids for students there, for international students specifically?
Yes. So before I get to the specific thing, I want to first acknowledge that what you're raising is a serious issue, right?
Yeah.
So when I went for higher education to US, and तब मैं 21 साल का 22 साल का रहूँगा, बहुत बिना सोचे समझे चले गया था. वहाँ जाके लैंड करे हो कि यार मैं तो वेजिटेरियन हूँ, यहाँ तो कुछ मिलता ही नहीं. एक वेरी हेल्पफुल लेडी ने मुझसे, जो कैंटीन थी, उसने कहा कि आप मैश पोटैटोज और ग्रेवी खा लो. वो बाद में दूसरे ने कहा भैया ग्रेवी मत खाना. वो लेडी के हिसाब से तो वेजिटेरियन हो ना, मीट थोड़ी दे रही हूँ, नॉट रियलाइजिंग कि ग्रेवी जो है वो मीट से ही निकल के आती है. उसके हिसाब से तो वो आलू दे रही थी मुझे.
So there are two types of vegetarian: Indian vegetarians and Western vegetarians.
No, this is not even Western vegetarians in some cases even stricter than us.
अच्छा, okay.
I'm just talking about myself. मैं तो केक खा लूँगा without asking कि इसमें अंडा पड़ा है कि नहीं. Some of them are even stricter, right? So anyways, I want to acknowledge that, right? And I don't want to make it sound like, hey, this is no problem. But so then one of the advantages of coming to a place like UMBC, which is in a big city, where there is a significant sort of international population and in particular Indian population. So at UMBC, I would say in our graduate student population, a very significant chunk, right? Certainly a plurality, and perhaps even a slight majority is students from India. So you're in an environment where there are other Indian students who have gone through the same experience, maybe a year or two ahead of you, know from day one to tell you कि भैया ग्रोसरी यहाँ से कर सकते हो, right? या इस दुकान में जाके ये तुम खा सकते हो या नहीं खा सकते हो. Again, and again, I also want to acknowledge that most Indians are not vegetarians necessarily. So, but even then, there are dietary restrictions of various flavors, right? Now to the specific question, so UMBC has a large sort of international office whose formal name is Center for Global Engagement. So they provide all the formal services, and in addition, the UMBC Vice President for Student Affairs also deals with some of those issues, right? Everything from making sure that we have campus shuttle buses that go to the nearby apartments where students live, so they have a safe mode of transport back and forth. There's a campus police. Almost every university in US has its own police force that is part. So ours is a part of the Maryland police, but we have our own campus police. The campus itself is very safe. we are every university in the US is required by law to publish statistics under the Clery Act. कोई भी आपके लिसनर्स जो किसी यूनिवर्सिटी के बारे में सोच रहे हैं, लेकिन गो एंड लुक अप द क्लेरी एक्ट स्टेटस. ये पब्लिक होती है, पब्लिश की जाती है, सरकार की रिक्वायरमेंट है अमेरिका.
So what is a Clery Act?
क्लेरी एक्ट बहुत साल पहले अमेरिका में किसी बच्चे के, मैं भूल गया, कुछ खराब हो गया था, मैं फॉरगेट एग्जैक्टली क्या हुआ था. तो उसके रिस्पॉन्स में एक कानून बना था अमेरिका में कि हर यूनिवर्सिटी को रिपोर्ट करना होता है. कैंपस में कोई लूटपाट की घटना हुई, कोई मर्डर की घटना, कोई जो भी इस तरह की घटनाएं होती हैं, द लिस्ट, every university has to report those statistics and that document is public. अमेरिकन सरकार की वेबसाइट पे है. क्लेरी एक्ट करके आप गूगल कर दीजिए और अपनी यूनिवर्सिटी जहां आप सोच रहे हो उसका नाम डाल दीजिए, आपको स्टेटिस्टिक्स मिल जाएंगी. वी आर वेरी सेफ, वी हैव वर्चुअली नो इंस्टेंसेस. हैविंग सेड दैट, आई विल ऐड द फॉलोइंग. मैं दिल्ली में पला बड़ा हूँ. दिल्ली के कुछ हिस्से हैं जहाँ अगर कोई जा रहा होगा या मैं खुद भी जा रहा हूँ तो मैं कहूँगा कि अच्छा भैया अंधेरे के बाद जरा ध्यान से, राइट. या अगर बस में चढ़ रहे हो तो, मेरे साथ तो पेरिस की मेट्रो में हो चुका है, छोटा सा लड़का था जेब काट रहा था by distracting me, you know, pretending not to speak English and asking some question कि जी मैं बाद में मालूम पड़ा वो जेब काट रहा था मेरी, पेरिस में, right? So if you're in a big city, you just have to be a little bit careful, but the campus itself, we are removed from the city,
so it's safe and
if
sound.
your campus and your, plus you have a police, right? That doesn't हमारे उसमें गोस्वामी तुलसीदास जी ने राम राज्य के बारे में लिखा था कि भाई वहाँ पे कोई क्राइम वाइम नहीं होती है. तो अब राम राज्य कहीं आ जाए तो अलग बात है, बाकी क्राइम तो होती है, हर जगह होती है.
You just have to be a little more cautious.
You have to be cautious.
Right. Absolutely true.
But the campus is very safe. You can look up the Clery statistics.
That's reassuring, right? So, sir, for my last question, since you were also an international student, आप भी रहे हो and आप भी गए हो, so you know all the hardships and challenges international students face. So, what tips would you like to give to our, you know, international students who, or maybe someone who is planning to, you know, study abroad, not specifically US also, but abroad, and also if there are any specific skill sets students should focus more on develop करने के लिए for the, you know, futuristic career market, job market?
So that's an interesting question, Shweta, and it can be sort of a long answer, but I'll say one common thing between these two threads, because the thread of future job market can also be true even if you are staying in India, right?
Right.
I think a common thread is adaptability. क्योंकि आप एक, मान लीजिए आप दिल्ली से बैंगलोर मूव करते हैं जॉब करने के लिए, और आप दिल्ली की तरह ही रहे, गुड़गांव की तरह ही रहना चाहते हैं. आप कहते हैं कि जी मैं लोकल लैंग्वेज सीखूंगा ही नहीं, या मैं लोकल ऑटो वाले से कैसे डील करना है वो मैं नहीं सीखूंगा, मुझे तो छोले भटूरे ही चाहिए, मैं इडली सांभर नहीं खाऊंगा.
Problem.
You will have problems.
Yeah.
Right? So adaptability, recognizing that you are going to a different environment, recognizing both that environment is different, and in some of these universities that you are going to, मैं अपने यहाँ का उदाहरण लेता हूँ. तो इस समय अगर आप कंप्यूटर साइंस की क्लास में बैठते हैं तो yes, there are a lot of students from India and there are a lot of students obviously from America, but there are students from, like in our campus there are students from more than 100 countries, right? So आपके अगले चेयर पे जो बैठा है वो नाइजीरिया से हो सकता है, वो ईरान से हो सकता है, वो यूरोप में कहीं से हो सकता है, वो लैटिन अमेरिका में कहीं से हो सकता है,
right?
So understanding, now to be fair, हम जब भारत में जब पले बड़े होते हैं तो जनरली हमें आदत होती है कि लोग फ़र्क दिखते हैं, लोग फ़र्क भाषाओं में बोलते हैं, हमें कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता. हम ज़्यादातर, अगर आप रीजनेबली वेल एजुकेटेड इंडिया से हैं तो, या इस पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया से हैं तो हिंदी और अंग्रेज़ी तो आप बोल ही लेंगे, और जो भी आपकी मदर टंग है वो तो तीन तो कहीं नहीं कहीं भाषाएं,
तीन तो आप बोल दो.
तो दैट्स अ यूजफुल स्किल सेट टू हैव, राइट? कि लोग अलग अलग भाषाएं बोल रहे हैं. आप जहाँ जा रहे हो, मान लो आप स्पेन में पढ़ने जा रहे हो, तो इट वुड बी, भले ही आपकी क्लास इंग्लिश में हो, इट वुड बी हेल्पफुल कि आप थोड़ी बहुत स्पेनिश सीख लो, राइट?
राइट.
it would be helpful to figure out कि local cuisine क्या है और उसमें आपके constraints क्या हैं और आप कैसे उनको match करा सकते हो, right? It would be helpful कि you know वहाँ पे छुट्टियाँ कब होती हैं, आपको कब क्या करना है. So this kind of adaptability, I think that's the most important tip. That the more rigid you are, the less willing to change in some ways while staying true to your essence that you are, the more difficulties you will face, right? And so in that sense, if you go from India to one of the Anglophone countries, यहाँ से आप अंग्रेजी बोलना जानते हो, आप दूसरे देश में जाओ, वहाँ भी अंग्रेजी बोल रहे हैं, काम चल जाता है. Right. So I would say adaptability is a tip.
Right.
And then and again, I say this with the full this thing that when I went as a 20-something-year-old, I was not thinking very hard, but I wish I had. I wish किसी ने मुझे बताया होता कि जी वहाँ पे जाके ना जब आप अपार्टमेंट रेंट करोगे तो फर्स्ट मंथ एंड मतलब उसका सिक्योरिटी डिपॉजिट देना होता है. मैं तो सोच के ही नहीं गया था यहाँ से और उस हिसाब से मैं पैसे लेके चले गया था. And again, and I went a long time ago. There were RBI restrictions. We were only allowed to take $300 with us. Okay. In those days. अब तो आप जितना मर्जी ले जा सकते हो, right? So having thought through some of these things, talking to some people that are already there, trying to understand, being prepared as much ahead of time, recognizing that no matter where you go, there will be some change.
Right.
आप दिल्ली में पले बड़े और आपको IIT खड़गपुर में प्लेसमेंट मिल जाती है तो भी चेंज तो होगा ही.
Absolutely.
So being prepared for that change as much as you can.
Right.
I think that's sort of another important thing to be successful.
Right. So you have to explore. There's no harm in exploring other cultures.
Absolutely.
It actually helps you in learning.
Right. And recognizing that when you are there as a guest. Right.
True.
यहाँ पे हम जोक करते हैं इंडियन स्ट्रेचेबल टाइम, पर मान लीजिए आप अमेरिका जाते हैं और आप किसी मीटिंग के लिए 5 मिनट लेट हो जाते हैं तो लोग देख रहे होते हैं कि जी तो 5 मिनट लेट है.
True.
आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि जी मैं तो क्या है जी 12 बजे मीटिंग थी, कोई बात नहीं, मैं 12:30 बजे टहलते हुए पहुंच रहा हूँ. यू विल नॉट बी सक्सेसफुल, राइट?
Don't restrict yourself and explore as much as you can.
Explore, be prepared for the change, but stay true to yourself.
Stay true to yourself. True, absolutely. Those are some really great advices. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Joshi, for coming, to our podcast, taking time and explaining all these questions in a very detailed way. It was an honor to have you here. And we had a really, insightful conversation. And I'm sure it's going to help a lot of students out there who are planning
Thank you very much, Shweta. I do appreciate you giving me this opportunity and hosting me in your very nice offices. And I also want to thank my colleagues who are shooting this. Thank you for your efforts, because eventually you will make this look really nice and polished.
Right. We will. So, and to our audience, if you guys have any questions about the UNBC and the application process, feel free to reach out to us, drop a comment, or visit your nearest AECC branch. Our counselors are always there to help you. And if you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends who need this. And subscribe to our channel for the next episode.